Topic 1. Lesson 5. The Land of Israel. Under Roman rule, to understand the political environment, we will examine Roman control and the resultant Jewish resistance. In the 1st century CE, the land of Israel was a crucible of religious tradition and imperial control, a region simmering under the weight of Roman occupation. In 63 BCE, the Roman general Pompey annexed Judea, marking the beginning of a complex and often fraught relationship between the Jewish people and the Roman Empire. The region, though granted a degree of autonomy, was subject to Roman oversight, with client kings like Herod the Great, 37 to 4 BCE, acting as intermediaries. Herod the Great, a master politician and builder, sought to balance his allegiance to Rome with his rule over a deeply religious Jewish population. His ambitious construction projects, including the expansion of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, showcased his political acumen and secured his place in history. Yet his reign was marked by heavy taxation, suppression of dissent, and perceived complicity with Roman interests, earning him the disdain of many Jews. After Herod's death, his kingdom was divided among his sons, a fragmentation that led to increasing instability. By 6 CE, Roman authorities deemed the situation untenable and imposed direct rule over Judea. Roman prefects, including the infamous Pontius Pilate, governed with a blend of pragmatism and repression. While the Pax Romana brought relative stability and facilitated trade across the empire, it came at the cost of heavy taxation, military presence, and the erosion of Jewish self-determination. The land was filled with heightened tensions during the Roman occupation. For the Jewish people, Roman occupation was not merely a political imposition, but a theological affront. Roman polytheism, with its pantheon of gods and emperor worship, clashed violently with Jewish monotheism. The mere presence of Roman standards bearing imperial images in Jerusalem was enough to provoke riots, a reflection of the profound cultural and religious divide. At the heart of Jewish resistance was the hope for a Messiah, a divinely appointed leader who would liberate Israel and restore its former glory. This messianic expectation, deeply rooted in scriptures and prophetic traditions, became a rallying cry for those who sought deliverance from Roman oppression. Periodic uprisings such as the First Jewish Revolt, 66-73 CE, underscored the intensity of these aspirations. However, these revolts often ended in tragedy, the most devastating of which was the destruction of the Second Temple by Roman forces in 70 CE. This catastrophic event not only ended the rebellion, but also reshaped Jewish religious and cultural identity for generations. Let's share some expanded insights into the political dynamics of Jerusalem in the time of Jesus. The Roman Empire's infrastructure played a dual role in this complex relationship. On one hand, its roads and aqueducts facilitated economic growth, enabling trade and communication between Judea and the broader Mediterranean world. On the other hand, these same systems allowed for the rapid deployment of Roman military forces, ensuring the swift suppression of dissent. The First Jewish Revolt is a pivotal case study in understanding these tensions. Sparked by a combination of economic exploitation, religious desecration, and political oppression, the revolt united disparate Jewish factions against a common enemy. Yet internal divisions among groups like the Zealots and Moderates weakened the resistance. The eventual siege and destruction of Jerusalem, culminating in the razing of the Second Temple, signaled the end of an era and the beginning of the Jewish diaspora. Extensive religious diversity was present in Jewish society, creating a mosaic of beliefs. First-century Judaism was far from monolithic. It was a dynamic and diverse religious landscape, with distinct groups vying for influence and articulating different visions of what it meant to live as God's chosen people under foreign rule. The following 4 major Jewish groups were very active in the days of Jesus. The Pharisees were popular among the common people. The Pharisees emphasized strict observance of the Torah and the oral traditions that interpreted it. Their teachings on purity, Sabbath laws, and the afterlife significantly shaped Jewish thought. The aristocratic Sadducees controlled the temple and rejected doctrines not explicitly found in the Torah, such as resurrection and angelology. They were pragmatic collaborators with Roman authorities, focusing on maintaining the status quo. A separatist sect, the Essenes lived in isolated communities, such as the one at Qumran near the Dead Sea. Their apocalyptic worldview and commitment to ritual purity set them apart from mainstream Jewish society. Quiet and revolutionary in nature, the Zealots advocated for violent resistance against Rome, viewing armed rebellion as a divine imperative. Messianic expectations differed across these groups. Messianic hopes were as varied as the groups that held them. Some anticipated a warrior king like David, who would restore Israel's political sovereignty, while others looked for a spiritual leader to purify the nation and usher in divine salvation. These expectations deeply influenced the religious and political climate in which Jesus ministered. Let us review a couple of insights into the political dynamics in the days of Jesus. The temple was the focal point of Jewish life, not only as a place of worship, but also as an economic and political hub. Its priestly leadership, dominated by the Sadducees, was a source of tension, particularly for groups like the Pharisees and Essenes, who critiqued what they saw as its corruption. Jesus' ministry engaged directly with this diversity. His teachings often aligned with Pharisaic beliefs, such as the resurrection, but he challenged their legalism and exclusivity. His cleansing of the temple and critique of its leadership echoed prophetic traditions and resonated with popular frustrations. Daily life and social structures were unique in first-century society. The economy of first-century Judea was rooted in agriculture. Olive oil, wine, and grains were staple products, supplemented by fishing, particularly in regions like Galilee. Trade connected rural communities to urban centers like Jerusalem, fostering economic interdependence. Society was deeply hierarchical. The priestly elite and landowners controlled wealth and power, while the majority of the population, farmers, fishermen, and laborers, struggled to make a living. The gap between rich and poor was stark, contributing to social unrest. Families were patriarchal, with men as heads of households. Women's roles were largely domestic, though some, like Mary Magdalene and other women in Jesus' ministry, defied these norms and took on active religious roles. Life in Jerusalem, with its bustling markets and religious festivals, contrasted sharply with the simplicity of rural villages in Galilee. Housing ranged from modest stone and mud structures in villages to more elaborate homes in the city. Clothing was functional and modest, with wool and linen as common fabrics. This series of narratives are intended to offer a comprehensive view of the world in which Jesus lived and taught, providing essential context for understanding his life and the movement he inspired.